Okay, now they're impossible to miss as you are driving down a country road. Wind farms are now a visible part of the rural landscape. They're touted as one of the solutions to our clean energy needs.
But some farmers who live around the turbines want to clean them out entirely. Our Simon Reeve picked up the debate in the nation's wind farm capital, which is South Australia.
It isn't the answers blowing in the wind out here. It's the questions. So many questions. Like, how did it get to this? A wind energy project that's torn apart a small country town. The battle of and for Waterloo has been taken up by the formidable Mary Morris.
I'm not an expert on wind. I'm an expert on the effects of the community. And I know that 43 families here are affected.
The first overwhelming impression is just how big these towers are. There are 37 of them running north-south over a 13-kilometre distance, and they literally dominate the landscape. The science. As a sail converts wind energy on a yacht, the blades atop the towers start turning as the wind gets up. The blades are connected to an axle, connected to a gearbox, which spins a shaft connected to a generator, which produces electricity that feeds into the power grid. And the hip bone is where? Simple, right? Well, how they work isn't disputed. The effects of the noise they produce is. Cole Schaefer runs a small farm 8 kilometres from the nearest towers. He was all for them in the beginning. After 2 years of living with them, his opinion couldn't be more emphatic.
It's not only just the noise side of things, it's the social side of things. You know, like, we're a very close-knit community. Now, it sort of divides from the haves and the have-nots. And look, if you've got an uneasy community, it's not a healthy community.
Once again this morning, sort of woken up about 5 o'clock and then, yeah, could hear the rumbling.
Dr. Sarah Laurie has heard stories like Colin's repeated around the country. She says there's growing evidence of the health impacts of wind farms on people living near them.
I think people entered into the contracts, turbine hosts have entered into contracts some time ago before the health problems were really known, and they did it with the best of intentions, you know, to save the planet, to drought-proof their farms, provide a steady, reliable income. But some of those turbine hosts are getting sick and some of them are having to leave their homes.
Infrasound, or low-frequency noise, is the issue. Wind farm companies say what noise, but People Champion Mary has helped win a 2-month independent test with potentially far-reaching results.
The guidelines need to be reviewed and take into account the whole sound spectrum. And I think we need a national set of guidelines so that it's fair for all the people in different states.
Away from the towers, wind farms, of course, have many supporters. Tim Kelly of the Conservation Council among them.
Wind energy in Australia is growing at very high rates. We've started off, in this state alone, we started off at no significant wind energy in 2003, and now a quarter of this state's electricity is coming from wind power.
That enthusiasm isn't shared around Waterloo. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, all manner of issues are being reported. Colin recently had a heart attack that has slowed but not stopped him.
I can't blame our neighbours that have wind farms, like I'm talking Waterloo now, because they would have been like ourselves until they were up and running. How were we to know how we would be affected by it?
I think the only way forward to sort out all the different interests of the stakeholders is to actually get the proper research done and find out precisely what it is that's waking these people up, that's causing these symptoms that they're getting, and work out what the safety parameters are.
The trick is, how do we have a national grid that can actually take the renewable energy from the best place to generate it to where the users are in the urban centres?
In my head, I completely get it. Australia and the world needs clean energy. Otherwise, the planet that we're handing to our kids will be trashed. But in my heart, I feel very strongly for people like Colin, because they have to live with the consequences of these enormous things. And it's not up to those of us who live in the city to tell them that they don't have a problem. Where does this go to, this story? Where does it go to for you? And your family?
I really wish I did know that, because I'd like our son to come out here with his family to live, but what do? You see, it's like an ant fighting an elephant. Unless you can bite him in the right place, what show have you got?
Very interesting, Simon.
It really is a very complicated and complex story, but, you know, they're doing it tough in the bush. These days, the margins are very, very slim. And we in the cities are a long way from... They are having to live with them. OK, yes.
So the biggest problem is the sound, the infrasound.
The biggest problem seems to be the infrasound. Now, I did not become a 24-hour expert on wind farms, but the companies and the governments are saying there is no problem with that low-frequency sound. People who are living with it 24 hours a day are saying, absolutely, that is a huge problem for us.
So we need to invest in technology around the sound emitted by the turbines.
And you know, I mean, how do you do that? Where does that begin? I think eventually we're going to have these wind farms in Australia. They will be everywhere, but they will be a long way from population centres.
Most importantly, I know you said 25% in South Australia in that story, but they don't put a lot of energy back into the grid.
Well, it's about 7% nationally. I mean, that's pretty big.
Well, look, it depends, again, who you listen to. There are so many vested interests in this as well. There are people who don't believe in climate change who are saying bad things about wind farms, and I don't believe them necessarily either. So, yeah, very, very interesting story.
The government figures are that in 2012, wind energy generated saved Australia over 7 million tonnes of carbon dioxide, which is the equivalent to the removal of 1.5 million cars from the roads. Obviously, there's a benefit.
There is.
So if the benefit is so huge, we really need to work out how to address the problem associated with the benefit.
For people like Colin in the bush, and we thank them very much for hosting us.
Nice one, like that.